Welcome to our POOIA Professional Organization of Iranian Americans monthly lecture series. I would like to extend my profound appreciation and gratitude to our young, distinguished speaker, Mr. Arsia Rozegar. Ladies and gentlemen, our POOIA supporters and donors, and the members of the board of POOIA. For those who do not know, POOIA is an affiliate of Kanun and is a non-religious, non-political, and purely an independent organization which holds the monthly lectures by scholars in different sciences to give us a wide spectrum of different sciences in addition to humanities and cultural topics, glorifying our country, Iran. All the POOIA lectures are in English so that the American and international professionals and young Iranian Americans who unfortunately do not know Farsi be able to participate. In addition to this, every year POOIA has an annual gala giving awards to some brilliant Iranian students from different fields from different universities in Atlanta, and this year also another state. Our next POOIA gala is on January 25th, which we will announce it soon. POOIA works tirelessly to uphold the pillars of its mission. Number one, to create a sense of synergy within population of Iranian Americans. Number two, to provide an opportunity for Iranian American professionals to network and support each other. And number three, to provide other forms of advice such as internship, career counseling, financial support, in a few cases, an anchor of support while creating a channel for Iranian American professionals to share their accomplishments, experiences, etc. Number five, to help the next generation of Iranian American professionals to succeed and prosper. The board members are all professionals in different fields. And before I introduce our speaker, I would like to announce the next two programs of Kanun. Now I will introduce Mr. Arsia Rozegar. Mr. Arsia Rozegar, creator of Shahnameh for kids, digital artist, colorist on comics, cartoonist, and dreamer, was born in Tehran, Iran, and raised in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Arsia Rozegar had a passion for heroes, mythology, and creativity. For years, his professional work was seen on comic book pages as color artist for titles such as Marvel's Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk. His most recent effort, however, is as children's book on Shahnameh for kids, an illustrated series based on ancient Persian mythology from Ferdowsi's 10th century epic poem. The Shahnameh for kids brings Iran's rich tales and legends to a brand new audience with colorful children's books that anyone of any background can enjoy and appreciate. Tonight, Mr. Rozegar will talk about Shahnameh and Iran's culture in contemporary media. On behalf of POOIA and Kanun, I thank you profusely to have accepted to talk for us for the second time, one for Kanun in Farsi and the other one for POOIA in English. Mr. Arsia, we are all ears. Please start your talk.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here and talk about the Shahnameh and Iranian culture and contemporary media from my experience and my perspective as a professional artist and also as a creator myself. So if I could begin, please let me begin my slides. I'm going to share for you. Let us begin. This is just the opening image, and I'll start from the very beginning. I've always been a fan of heroes and creativity and just the basic concept of the good guy versus the bad guy. That's probably where it all first started and began for me personally. And my earliest memory of this sort of concept was these toys called Masters of the Universe. It was with a hero, He-Man, and his allies of good fight against the evil Skeletor and his henchmen of evil. And this was my first exposure to this kind of concept. And that's where the root of it all began, my fascination of graphic art, the heroes, and this was the beginning of it. And here's some images from Masters of the Universe. It's He-Man lifting up the evil Beastman. And my passion for this extended into comic book superheroes as well. I got into Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, so much so, I loved this so much that I wanted to be a professional comic book creator as I became a teenager and developed my drawing skills. And one thing led to another, and eventually I did become a professional comic book creator. I actually had the pleasure and honor of working for Marvel Comics. I got to work on some of their top titles as a color artist. This page right here is a page I did for Marvel's The Incredible Hulk. I worked on the Hulk for a while. Here's another page of the Hulk I worked on. I even worked on Iron Man for a couple years. I was the color artist. And as these years went on, I began to understand professionally all the aspects and work that goes into creating a comic book, from the story to the producing the art to creating the production so it's ready for printing. Here's another Iron Man page. And here's an example of the process. You get the line art, and my work for Marvel was to fill in the art, the colors, I mean, into the art and give it a color look to it. And here's an image of Kaveh Ohangar, the blacksmith from the famous blacksmith from the Shahnameh. This was drawn by a friend of mine, Andre Ariojo, who's a really well-known Portuguese comic book artist. He's worked for Marvel as well. And he drew this, and here's some of my coloring on this. So I've always been a graphic artist. I've always loved heroes and mythology. Now, I really wasn't in tap with my culture for the longest time, to be frank with you. I didn't really care, to be frank with you, when I was really younger. But as I got older, I began to appreciate how beautiful our culture and our history is. And this is Marcus Garvey. He's a famous writer, and he has a famous quote that says, "A person who does not know their culture and history is like a tree without roots." And that really struck a chord with me. And I began to really dive into my culture, to learn its history, to learn its mythology and stories. And I eventually got into the Shahnameh, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest works of literature ever. But also that it has some fantastic tales of the heroes that I was talking about earlier, those very heroes that fascinated me when I was a little kid. And it has some of the greatest tales of heroes overcoming adversity and fighting evil. And it was just exactly the kind of stuff that I loved. Now, as I was a professional artist, a famous comic book came out by Frank Miller named 300. I'm sure a lot of Iranians are familiar with this. It did a great disservice to our culture and our representation. And this came out when I first was a professional artist. And I distinctly remember reading this comic book and seeing how grossly inaccurate it was, how xenophobic it was, and how it inaccurately portrayed Iranian culture and history. For example, this is Frank Miller's depiction of the Immortals. As an Iranian, we've seen the depiction of the Immortals all our lives, but for some reason, when he wanted to depict it for the Western audience, he didn't depict this. This was a depiction of Immortal from Takhta Jamshid from Persepolis Reliefs. Actually, this is Shush. I'm sorry, this is Shush. But basically, it's Hakamanashi reliefs from the Achaemenid dynasty, which takes place in the story of 300. And again, I saw it was very peculiar to me that the representation in that media was very inaccurate. And here's a Frank Miller's rendition of Khashiar. For some reason, he decided to take away Khashiar's masculinity, his beard, and he made him kind of a very androgynous character, interestingly enough. But again, as we know from Iranian history, this is not Khashiar at all. This is what Khashiar was. And also, Artemisia, the first naval commander in recorded history, who was a female, again, depicted in a very negative light. You'd think you would depict Artemisia in a positive light, being the person that she was in history. Now, this is a very profound time for me because I realize that, this kind of stuff happens all the time where Iranian culture is not properly represented in mainstream media. So as a professional comic book artist, I thought it was my duty and responsibility to put something out there that properly represents Iranian culture. So I thought about what I would do. There's lots of great sources in history, as Frank Miller did, but maybe do that in a positive light. But since I was a fan of the hero mythology, I thought, what better stories to bring to the Western audience than Shahnameh stories. But it wasn't just the Western audience I wanted to kind of do this for, but I also wanted to do for Iranian Americans who are growing up outside of Iran to learn about their culture. Because when I was growing up, there really weren't books about the Shahnameh, about history. There was some stuff about, again, the Greco-Persian Wars and also Alexander of Macedon's conquest of Iran. And that's about it. But there really wasn't that much that properly depicted our culture. And I'll get into some stuff later on in the talk about some stuff that's been in the media. So my first thought was doing Rostam. He was the ultimate hero. He goes through the classic hero's quest, akin to Joseph Campbell, who's a famous authority on mythology. And he has a famous book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it chronicles how the hero's quest is a very common thing in all cultures around the world. And Rostam's Haftkhan is the ultimate hero's quest, in my opinion. And I thought it would be a really fun idea to create a video game that depicts Rostam's Haftkhan. And each stage is each of his khans. And by the seventh khan, he reaches the Diva Sipi, the white Div, as his final boss. And I spent about a year working on the book. Here's the mock-up of the Rostam design that I came up with. And you would animate the limbs as the character is walking across the level. Here's a mock-up of the Rostam and the evil wizard of Mozandaran. But it was the three of us on this team, and I learned firsthand that programming a game is a lot of hard work. It took us a year to do a rough version of just the first level, and it would probably take us 7 years to finish the game. So I thought, this is not the prudent way. I want to put out something, relatively quick. So I scrapped the video game idea, and I decided to focus my energy and time into Shahnameh for Kids. Now, Shahnameh for Kids is a children's book series retelling the stories and tales from Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, the epic poem, which is all Iranians are familiar with the Shahnameh. And I thought it would be a good idea to introduce this to non-Iranians as well, because the stories are just the greatest. They have valuable lessons and morals, but there's also an esoteric level that the Shahnameh is on, that Ferdowsi goes on. But I thought I would do an all ages telling of these stories for all audiences of any background, similar to, say, how the Disney animations were of the 1990s, where a child could enjoy it, a teenager could enjoy it, a middle-aged person enjoy it, a grandparent can enjoy it. Anybody of any age or any background group could enjoy a classic Disney animation. I wanted to approach the same way with these books. My first book was the story of Zal and Seymour. Now, I specifically did this first because I wasn't sure if I would do other books to follow, if it would be successful, if people would support it. So I decided to do my favorite story of the Shahnameh, which is the story of Zal and Seymour. Zal and Seymour are two of my favorite characters in the Shahnameh. I love the morals and the lessons in this story of, not judging someone based on their appearance. Also, unconditional love, the way Zal loved and took care of Seymour loved and took care of Zal. And I also love the lesson of forgiveness when Zal forgives his father Psalm for abandoning at the end. So I thought this would be a great tale to do as a children's book. And also the imagery of Seymour would be really appealing as well to children. So this is my first book that I did in the Shahnameh for Kids series. Fortunately, it was received very positively that I continued the story. And what better to continue than with Zal's son, Rostam. Now, Rostam, as we know, is Iran's probably most popular, most famous mythic hero. He goes on fantastic adventures and quests. Just the ultimate superhero, the original superhero, if you ask me. So that was my second book. This was a lot of fun and a lot of, it was received well, that I immediately followed it with The Bravery of Ghorda Farid. And now this is an empowering tale of an Iranian heroine, a female hero, who bravely defends Iran by herself against Sohrab and Turanian army. Now, I thought this would also be a great story of empowerment, especially for little girls, so they can look at it to an Iranian female hero. And I followed that up with Ancient Tales of Greater Iran. Now, this is a thicker book that contains multiple tales from the Shahnameh. I start from the very beginning of civilization with Qumars, the first Shah of Iran, and it chronicles the first 6 Shahs. We go from Qumars to his son. Actually, his son Siamak isn't the Shah, but he's in the story. And then we go to his son. Oh my gosh, his name escapes me right now. I can't believe this. His son who discovers fire, and then we go to Tahmuris, the Dev Tamer, and then we go to Jamshid.
Hushang is his son.
Excuse me?
Hushang.
Hushang, that's right, Hushang. Hushang's fire. I can't believe I forgot his name. Yes, Hushang to Tahmuris to Jamshid, and then we have the reign of Zahok, and we reach up to Feridun, who ultimately is the last character in the story. And it also has Kaveh Ahangad in the story. It has multiple tales in there. And this was my most recent book. Now, it was important for me that in this media, I depict the visuals of Iranian culture the proper way. Now, these stories take place in the Mythic Age a long, long time ago. There's nothing left of that period. But I still wanted to use visualization that properly represented Iranian culture. Like the architecture here is reminiscent of Haqamanashi architecture, specifically Takht Jamshid. The pillars there are the bold pillars. The clothing that I have is a mixture of Haqamanashi clothing, Ashkani clothing, and Sasanian clothing. The weapon here is loosely based on Haqamanashi, and even Psalm's headdress here I based on Haqamanashi reliefs. So I wanted the visuals to be akin with Iranian aesthetics. The armor here is Haqamanashi armor. The gores that get on, the mighty mace that the Jahan Pahlavans of Iran were known to wield. I did that in the design of the Takht Jamshid sutuns, the columns. So the aesthetic was very important for me. Like the sutuns here, I use the Homa imagery. That is seen all throughout Iranian aesthetics. Now here's some images. And even Seymour, my inspiration of Seymour was from the Shah Tahmasp edition of the Shahnameh, which uses rich colors. And I wanted to kind of even have, even though it's not overt miniature influences, if you pay attention to the subtleties, you can see the influence of Iranian miniature paintings in there. There's Seymour. And there's Zal. Now, one of my favorite stories in the Shahnameh is when Zal meets the princess of Kabul, Rudabe. And it's a famous story where she lets down her hair, and which sounds very familiar to Western audiences. But Zal the gentleman, he's a proper Pahlevan. He doesn't want this to inconvenience the princess, so he's resourceful and throws his lasso and climbs the lasso, as opposed to the famous story of Rapunzel, which he yanks on her hair, which sounds very similar to the story of Zal and Rudabeh, but Ferdowsi's story predates the grim fairy tale version of Rapunzel by at least 600 years. But even then, we know that Ferdowsi isn't the original of these stories, that these tales were told even orally from a long time ago. So the story of Rudabeh and Zal, in my opinion, is even older than 600 years old. Okay, so let's, like, even the rendition of Raksh in my book, I wanted it to match the miniatures. Ferdowsi describes the saffron colors of Raksh, and you see the miniature artists use the similar kind of color scheme that I wanted to replicate. For those of you that are familiar with the Iranian artist, Nasser Ovisi, who's a famous Iranian artist, he is one of the sponsors of the books. And if you're familiar with his painting, he's a fantastic artist depicting horses. So I drew him as the horse master giving Rostam Raksh. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now, one of the most recent
Oh my God, I think it froze.
let me stop sharing for a second, reshare.
Oh, yeah.
Let me stop for 1 second.
Mhm.
This is the second set of slides I want to share now. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about some contemporary other examples of media that represents Iranian culture and the Shahnameh. Now, I'm sure a lot of you own this edition of the Shahnameh by Hamid Rahmanian, a really beautiful edition where he digitally renders the Shahnameh stories, but in a miniature style. He's kind of updated it, but uses the classic miniature aesthetics, and it's very fantastic edition of the Shahnameh, in my opinion. And he even did a pop-up book as well, where you open the pages and it's 3D. Very beautiful, again, in the classical Iranian miniature style. And he also recently has been recently doing a shadow puppet theater, where it's a theater performance of the tale of Bijan and Menije, another famous story from the Shahnameh. One of the more common, especially growing up, one of the more common instances of Iranian culture that I was exposed to outside the Greco-Persian Wars and books and Iskandar's conquering Iran is, interestingly enough, stories from the Old Testament and the Bible. And there are lots of illustrated books that tell the classic tale of Esther, who was the queen married to Khashiar, Xerxes. And a lot of the times in these books, it was interesting, they would have a more accurate depiction of historically Iranian figures like Khashiar. Another famous tale is of Daniel and Dariush in the lion's den. And you see these a lot of the times. Here's Esther and Khashiar. And you see a lot of these times interestingly enough, they use accurate depiction of Iranian culture. You see they use the Takhta Jamshid architecture. The bodyguard, the soldier, uses proper Hakamanashi clothing. Same with even Esther and Khashiyar. They're depicted in an accurate way. You even see the incense thing like you see a Takht Jamshid depicted as well. So interesting enough, classic Bible stories here had proper depictions of Iranian figures, interestingly enough. Now, for me as a kid, one of the earliest video games that I was exposed to was Prince of Persia. This came out in 1989. The programmer was Jordan Mechner, and he did a classic side-scrolling video game where the hero was in ancient Iran, and he was supposed to rescue the princess. This has a kind of like 1001 Nights kind of feel to it aesthetically, and it's a very successful video game series. There have been over 10 video games of Prince of Persia made, and it's still popular to this day. A few years ago, there's been some comic books about Prince of Persia as well. This one came out by Jordan Mechner and A.D. Sina, and it doesn't seem to follow the story of the video game. It seemed to have its own separate story, but I really enjoyed this Prince of Persia book because, again, it was a nice representation of Iranian culture. It takes place between two time periods of Iran. So the story, narratively, it takes place in two separate time periods. And there's even like a surprise visit by Seymour in this story. It's really, really, really well done in my opinion. I recommend this comic book, The Prince of Persia. This specific one. There's a few of them. The other ones aren't that good, but this one is really, really nice. I recommend it. And the series, the video game series is so popular that it spawned an actual Disney movie, Prince of Persia. Again, it doesn't seem to be depicted Iranians too poorly. The main character's name is Dastan, which is the name of Zal, the hero Zal. His proper name is Dastan in the Shahnameh. So I thought that was interesting. It was a fun movie, but I didn't think it was too good. It wasn't that good of a movie in my opinion. It wasn't too impressive, but at least the depiction of Iranians wasn't in a negative light that we see all the time. And another popular video game is called Civilization. And it's a historical game where you can kind of work on the different ancient historical civilizations. And one of the civilizations that's depicted and you can play is ancient Persian Iranian civilization. And this is Dariush. And you can see here, again, decent representation of Iran, the Takht Jamshid, the Bull Sutun columns. And also in the game, the music is Morgha Sahar. So when you see the Dariush character, it plays Morgha Sahar in a kind of classical kind of way. No vocals, just the music. So that was very, very cool for me too. A long time ago, I believe it was in the 60s, a movie came out called Jason and the Argonauts. And it's about the classic Greek mythology of Jason and how he goes in search of the Golden Fleece. It's another classic hero's quest in mythology, but this one's a Greek one. And when he goes to Medea, which is Maud from ancient times, the filmmakers depict very Iranian aesthetics around. Like you see here, the columns are depicted as Takht Jamshid columns from Persepolis. You can see here also on the screen, on the bottom left, you see exact replicas of Takht Jamshid, of the Maud and the Persians together. And the steps are exactly like Takht Jamshid. So whoever did this set design from this this classic Hollywood movie used Takht Jamshid as an influence for the Maud Palace. And let's talk about Star Wars, probably one of the most popular properties of all time, of recent time. And even with this, you see traces of kind of Iranian mythology where it's good versus evil. But not just that, the kind of the theme, the point of the Star Wars is that you personally, as an individual, have a choice to make. Do you choose the dark side, Ahriman, or do you choose the light side? Um, and I couldn't help but notice the Zarathustra, the Zoroastrian kind of Avestan kind of aspects of the Star Wars mythology, of the choice you have to make as an individual, as a personal person. And also was also kind of interesting to me because in the story of Star Wars, Darth Vader, the father of Luke, I'm sorry if this is a spoiler, if nobody's seen Star Wars, but there's a big reveal that the evil guy is the good guy's father. But Darth Vader has a plan of joining with his son and overthrowing the Emperor and ruling the galaxy, father and son. Now, this is very reminiscent to me of Rostam and Sohrab, where Sohrab wants to join with his father and overthrow the Shah and rule as a father and son duo, which is what kind of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader wanted to do with his son. So that was very interesting to me to kind of see a Rostam and Sohrab kind of aspect to the story as well. Not only the Zarathustra kind of elements to it, but also the Rostam and Sohrab elements. And let's go to one of my favorite movies, The Matrix. Classic story of another hero's quest, but this one, it's the story of the chosen one, Neo. Now he kind of goes through his whole story, but there's a self-realization in this story where he becomes cognizant and aware that he is the one. And we have a very, very similar story in the Shahnameh of our own kind of chosen one with Feridun. He even has even foretold as an omen before he was even born that a child named Feridun would be born, and he would overthrow Zahok's evil reign and bring balance and bring good back to Iran. So that's really interesting to see that kind of theme of the chosen one in the Shahnameh. And what was also interesting, very similar to how Neo was able to stop bullets just using his mind in the movie. Feridun was also able to stop a boulder just using his Fareh Izadi in the Shahnameh too. There's a scene where his brothers Badmayun and Katiyun are kind of put under a spell, a tlez, and they go up and roll a boulder down. And this is kind of a test for Feridun. And he stops the boulder, kind of very similar fashion that Neo was able to stop the bullets in The Matrix. We'll go to another popular series, Game of Thrones. This was super popular. Everybody was watching this all over the world. And one of the more famous characters in the story of Game of Thrones is Daenerys Targaryen from House Targaryen. And she is the birthright to the throne. And her story is she gathers an army and she goes from kingdom to kingdom. And wherever there's slavery, she would liberate the slaves from the kingdoms that she would conquer. And for me, as a historical fan, this echoed a lot of Kurosh Buzurg, Cyrus the Great, who was known as not just a conqueror, but he was a liberator. So wherever he would go, he would liberate and abolish slavery. So this had very kind of Cyrus the Great kind of elements to it when I was watching this. And I come to find out that George R.R. Martin is a huge history fan. And a lot of the stories that he has in Game of Thrones is kind of influenced by actual historical events. For example, there's another kind of side story that's kind of influenced by the English Game of Roses, the War of the Roses. So it wouldn't be surprising me if she was loosely inspired by Cyrus the Great. And there we see a depiction of Cyrus the Great. And another recent animation on PBS is Bobak and Friends. Very fun cartoon about a little young boy named Bobak. I recommend it. It's for everybody, and it also depicts our culture in a positive way. And there's a special episode about Nowruz. Very fun book in my opinion. Fun series in my opinion. And speaking of children's books, there was a nice book in 1989 published by Christopher Manson called The Gift for the King, and this also takes place in kind of the Haqemanashiyah period. But it's really, again, it depicts Iranian culture in a kind of positive way, a more accurate way, something that you don't see too often. And this book came out in 2022, The Monster in the Bathhouse. I absolutely love this book. It's by Shahnameh, and it's really fantastic. And I'm going to give a little spoiler. I'm sorry if I'm spoiling it, but the monster in the end is revealed to be a div, and they draw the monster in the classic Iranian div aesthetic. And also there's a card game called Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a very kind of card game when it's kids. It's kind of like Pokemon, but like different than that. And one of the characters that you can use in the card game is Seymour. They have different renditions of Seymour that you can play. I've never played this, but I know a lot of kids do play Yu-Gi-Oh! And also there was a play recently of Rostam and Sohrab. And a really fantastic comic book by a friend of mine, Daran Argi, called Persia Blues. And it's about this young woman named Minu who kind of she transitions between two different kind of worlds in a way. It's kind of like where she's kind of outside of Iran, but there's also elements in there that kind of depict classic Iranian mythology of good versus evil here. And there's Diva Sipid, and Rostam even makes an appearance here. You see the Takht Jamshid architecture there. There you see Rostam fighting Diva Sipid. And there she's Minu. And the same artist who drew that also, Brent Bowman, he also did a little mini comic that's a Western, and it's loosely based on Rostam and Sohrab, where a young gunslinger comes into town and he challenges the sheriff, and the sheriff unknowingly kills the young gunslinger, but he realizes that it's his son based on the gun that he's carrying. So it's inspired by the classic story of Rostam and Sohrab, but in a Western setting. And recently, there's also been a TV series on Alexander Iskandar on Netflix. Now, I mean, they seem to use proper stuff halfway, like the banner here that actually is Kurosh's banner, the eagle. But this kind of stuff really doesn't seem to be represented properly. The swords were inaccurate. There's a lot of inaccuracies also in this one. So I'm not sure what to think, to be frank with you. They nail a couple things right, but they go way off with the depiction on a lot of other things. And that brings me to the end of this. I think I may have gone a little fast, and here's my children's book series, Shahnameh for Kids. And again, I try to make it a point that I did my part in properly representing Iranian culture and the stories, showing just how wonderful and how fun, and really anybody can enjoy these stories because they have universal kind of lessons and morals in there that anybody can really learn from. And I'm doing a new book right now on Rudabe and Zal. Just a little mini story of Rudabe and Zal's romance. That's my favorite love story in Iranian mythology because it's a classic tale of forbidden love and the two houses coming together. Very similar to Romeo and Juliet, but fortunately this has a happy ending to it, unlike that. And that's about all I have for this so far.